Please drop funding.
Exploitation within developed nations may have ended in name. But there is no doubt that the ramifications of a system that systematically debases the common worker for profit continues on. Zero-hour workers live day to day with no idea of job or income security and are often merely understood as Tetris pieces by their employers to move around as tools rather than as breadwinners of the family. We think government is absolutely obliged in that case, both morally and legally, to ban zero-hour contracts. How we define zero-hour contracts? We think zero-hour contracts allow employers to hire staff with no guarantee of work. When a person is not contracted to work a set number of hours and is only paid for the amount of time they work. Our policy is extremely simple. We're going to ban zero-hour contracts. We're going to change them to fixed-hour contracts where you have a guaranteed number of hours. We're going to place severe financial penalties on all companies that change this. What's the status quo with zero-hour contracts? The use of zero-hour contracts has tripled in many industries because companies tried to save money during the 2008 financial crisis. It was meant to be a temporary measure that ended with recovery. Unfortunately, what was a relatively understandable action has mushroomed into an unhealthy and unmanageable dependence on them by many corporations. Companies have found out how to exploit them, and they are doing so right now. Who uses zero-hour contracts? Two sectors. This debate centers on the most vulnerable individuals, the 700,000 of them in the UK. Two sectors account for more than half of the jobs within zero-hour contracts. First is accommodation and food, restaurant and catering. McDonald's and Sports Direct employ more than 90% of its workers on zero-hour contracts. But this is also on administrative and support services, cleaning and office support. These account for more than half. These are the very bottom rungs of society, the very people at the very bottom of the social ladder. But this debate is not mostly about students. No, thank you, ma'am. We think that students occupy less than a quarter of today's debate, and we think that they're going to be fixed and they're going to be able to strive under a fixed-hour contract as well. And the comparative in this debate is ultimately versus fixed-hour contracts. So, our side has three arguments for you today. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the necessity to provide stability to employees. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the harms of exploitation. And thirdly, my second speaker, G1, is going to come up to you and talk about why it harms the economy when there is less consumer confidence. But on to our first argument, on why there is a necessity to provide stability to employees. We have two subpoints. Firstly, there's an unpredictability of schedule, and secondly, there's an unpredictability of income. The unpredictability of schedule. We think in theory these zero-hour contracts were supposed to provide flexibility for the employees, but people are naturally pressured to show up for last-minute shifts because of a necessity of income. We think this has a direct harm to individuals' lifestyle. Often, workers are notified at the beginning of their shifts with a text message, smiley face, or sad face emoticon. Quite literally, employment by emoticon. Often 40% of workers are given this text message at the beginning of a shift. And then that might sound like a cheap joke to you, but we think that ultimately, in a moment, sir, that's not a joke for individuals who are struggling to put food on the table and don't know when their income is going to get in from one day to the next. Yes, sir.
Yet these people get paid a minimum wage or even more. These people receive social security benefits. So how does this fall under the classification of exploitation?
Absolutely not true. Employers, often what they do is that they give a certain number of hours that don't meet the benefit minimum. And we also tell you that the only reason you have a minimum wage in the status quo is because you have a minimum wage to guarantee a set amount of income. But you don't know when that income is going to come from one day to the next, let alone 1 hour to the next. We don't think you're going to be able to understand that minimum wage. But we also tell you that it has a massive psychological impact, fear and anxiety, massive impact on individual households, effect on other individuals. We think when you pay for childcare, you need to be able to know when you can provide accommodation for the child. Under their side, that's impossible because you don't know when you're going to be able to pay for a child. And you're also unable to get loans and mortgages because they aren't aren't regular employment, and you don't get that kind of credit. The majority of people on zero-hour contracts are women, ladies and gentlemen, and especially because of that, it's especially problematic that they can't care for their children of that. But secondly, they also tell you that there's an unpredictability of income. For these people on zero-hour contracts, every single day is a challenge for them. They need to be able to earn the living wage. More than 75% of all workers on zero-hour contracts cannot earn the living wage in a year. Almost half of all zero-hour contract workers want more hours. Now compare that to fixed hour contracts, where less than 10% want more hours. We think when you don't know how much income you're going to get from one day to the next, you're going to get less hours inherently. Compared to zero-hour workers get 25 hours on average versus 37 hours for fixed-hour contracts. It harms your right to the minimum wage. In the status quo, we have a minimum wage because we understand that whatever job you have, you deserve a minimum standard of living. But ladies and gentlemen, under their side, you don't have a minimum wage because you have no guaranteed hours, which means there's no guarantee that you will attain a certain amount of income, thereby infringing upon your right to a minimum wage. More than 3/4 can't earn a living wage. And we think that government has a sacred obligation because it's the only actor to provide the dignity for these individuals to know when exactly their income is going to come in. When exactly they're going to be able to put food on their table for their children. When exactly are they going to be able to stay at home for their children who are waiting for them at home. But secondly, on the harms of exploitation, we think there is zero leverage for these individuals. These individuals live on a day-to-day basis for a fear of penalty. The companies literally don't have to fire you if they don't like you. They just don't have to give you work. We think there's a fundamental asymmetry of power. They may come up and talk about how these individuals are making a conscious choice. You're not making a conscious choice when there's pressure upon you to do so. We think few rights are granted to employees that are exclusive to zero-hour contracts. Corporations exploit to force these workers to be subservient, and we think they have a specialty. Yes, ma'am.
In the UK, you should know that employees under zero-hour contracts are less likely to think they are treated unfairly than those that are under a permanent contract.
Ma'am, that's massively ironic when I'm giving you two statistics why these workers are at the very bottom and they actually want more hours. But even so, we gave you the context. We just came out, this whole world came out of one of the worst financial crises we've ever seen in our history. These workers wanted anything. They wanted any job. But ladies and gentlemen, we on team government have to tell you that these individuals can do better, and we need to make sure that these individuals can do better. And what we're going to talk about in my third argument, we'll further talk about why that's good for the economy. But ladies and gentlemen, we think these individuals don't have a right to refuse for two extensions. Firstly, industries with zero-hour contracts have no labor unions. We think McDonald's fought labor unions for 60 years. Labor unions prevent you from being penalized when you speak out, and zero-hour contracts increase the exploitation. When you don't have zero-hour labor unions, and you also don't have fixed-hour contracts, that means that you have an increased fear of retaliation. We also tell you zero-hour contracts are a way for governments to force welfare on their individuals. The government will cut benefits for you when you don't take your jobs. We think employees are forced to take these contracts or they risk losing their benefits. It's not a conscious choice when you are going to lose your benefits when you don't take that job. We think that the government is absolutely immoral to cut welfare for a parent for not taking a job that forces between her and a child. But we also tell you that within zero-hour contracts, individuals are penalized for protecting workers. It was shown with the House of Commons briefing. We also tell you companies use zero-hour contracts to prevent having to provide for benefits, as hours can be regulated just below the minimum standard for providing benefits. For example, if health insurance is mandated after 26 hours, employers will employ those employees for 25 hours. They don't have to provide those benefits for them. We think convenience for the employer is insecurity for the employee. We also tell you that companies like Amazon use these to turn workers on each other because they fight for those kinds of wages. They place GPS trackers on their workers. We think it forces indirect harm. And for those reasons, we tell you that employees are more than Tetris blocks. We tell you it's time to stay in a moral society that if you work full-time, you deserve a minimum wage and a living wage. We are extremely proud to propose.
The proposition today speaks about morality. There is nothing more in poverty, there is nothing more in hunger, and there is nothing more in extinguishing the only possibility that many people have to guarantee themselves a job, to guarantee the feeding of their children at the end of the week. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The motion before us today is this House will ban the use of zero-hour contracts. We would like to accept the definition provided by the other team, but we would like to clarify that zero-hour contracts do provide basic social security benefits, which was something the proposition conveniently ignored. Let me tell you that, for example, in the UK, which is one of the countries that most use zero-hour contracts, sick days are guaranteed, annual leave is guaranteed, and health insurance is also guaranteed. So therefore, we do not see how that could be exploitation at all. What we recognize is that we do not agree with banning, but we believe that regulations must be enforced in order to prevent employer abuses, as it is done with any contract that we can analyze as permanent. Among these regulations, provisions we can find determining a minimum time to warn the employee for cancellation or need denied, and the exclusivity clauses that can be banned, such as done in the United Kingdom. So therefore, what we believe is that we should regulate these contracts. We agree with this, but we do not believe that banning is the solution for all of these people that they are trying to defend. The reason that promotes today's debate is that on the one hand, certain workers and industries require flexibility, and our current labor market offers a reduced amount of jobs. Therefore, people in need of income have little options to sustain their families. And the issue for today's debate is whether the potential benefits of banning zero-hour contracts justify the real harms, including, but not limited to, first, the loss of jobs and family incomes. Second, the loss of a proven method to revitalize the economy in times of crisis. Third, the damage to businesses and entire industries that run on these contracts. And finally, fourth, the lack of choice for flexibility for those who require it. Having said all this, we as an opposition will tackle this motion through a three-layered analysis. In our first layer of analysis, we will develop our argument, which is the unbearable lightness of one size fits all, and response to the economic impact of the motion. In the second layer of analysis, we will deal with our argument, choices, chances, changes, which explains the option of flexibility on behalf of the employee. And lastly, on our third layer of analysis, we will focus on our argument, the one who adapts is the one who survives, which responds to the specific sectors of industries which require the use of such contracts. Now yes, before I move to our case, we would like to refute the points presented up until now with the proposition. First of all, they stood up and told us that they would fix contracts with number of hours determined, and that they would penalize companies which didn't fulfill these concepts. However, we have two answers for this. First, if we accept that these are taken as temporary measures in times of crisis, we need to accept that employers are not willing to hire because they are under a crisis, which will be further on explained throughout our speech. I'll take you in a second. Furthermore, what we believe is that if they do not want to hire, then companies will not pay for the work that it is not done in times of crisis. So therefore, what we find is that this model is totally unenforceable. Yes, sir.
Your side talks about the necessity to decrease unemployment in times of economic crisis. We could reduce unemployment by a massive amount if we got rid of maternity leave, minimum wage, and
I understand your point. However, maternity leave is also guaranteed under zero-hour contracts. Let me tell you that, for example, maternity leave is calculated with the last weeks that you have worked, and if not, you're guaranteed at least a minimum maternity leave. So therefore, what we find, once again, is that exploitation is not really a clause under zero-hour contracts. They told us that denied. Then they spoke about stability and how we should provide, how people would provide flexibility, but they would be exploited at the end of the day. To this we have some answers. First of all, the Office of National Statistics of the UK says that 70% of the workers that are under zero-hour contracts do not want more hours. So therefore, what we find is a clash between what they have just said. We also find that at the end of the day, the two options that we can analyze are either you are unemployed in the crisis or you have a zero-hour contract and try to have an income to feed your children. Yeah. So if we both teams agree that the main objective is to feed our children, let me tell you that unemployed, they are not fulfilling it. And that the possibility of having a full-time contract, a permanent contract in times of crisis is totally none. So yes, first we would like to ask them, and please the second speaker to answer, what will happen with the people that are actually left unemployed? Because they will not be hired, as we will explain before. So yes, moving into our first argument, which is the unbearable lightness of one size fits all. What we'll tell you is that the current job offer at a worldwide level clearly is reduced, and unemployment levels are rising, such as in countries like Peru, Portugal, Spain, South Africa, and many others, since the crisis of 2008. What we believe is that in crisis, employers do not hire at all. First of all, because of the high costs due to the regulation that workers actually have. And second of all, because when the demand increases, what we find is they have fear that it is temporary and not permanent. So therefore, they don't hire, but instead they increase their workload of current employees. This avoids costs by not hiring. But at the end of the day, it does not reactivate the economy. Now, when we find zero-hour contracts, what we analyze is a flexibility for the employers, I'll take you in a second, which fits the actual need of the industries. The lack of flexibility leads us to the not hiring. But when we put the incentive for them to employ people, for them to have zero-hour contracts in order to be incentivized to hire these people, we have income for those people. and this is a measure that activates the economy. Yes, sir.
Your side says that zero-hour contract workers are guaranteed things like health insurance. Well, health insurance is only required by the government
I
after a
understand your
certain
point.
amount of
However,
hours.
that means once again that if we have health insurance guaranteed, we are not exploiting our workers. We have mentioned a lot of social benefits, and therefore that is not exploitation. Let's analyze the case of the Italy's Jobs Act. Labor law reforms which promoted stability led to the results of unemployment reduction from 12.7 to 12.4 in only 3 months of 2015. So therefore, flexibility increases employment. This was also the case in Ireland, in which zero-hour contracts were increased, and therefore the economy was revitalized. So what we believe is that every policy that incentivizes the circulation of money is totally positive. Now yes, even if we were not to focus in our crisis, we must analyze the scenario for our second option. The choices, chances, and changes. Many people nowadays in the labor market require flexibility, such as, for example, students and retirees. Let me tell you that the ONS of the UK actually said that 50% of the people under zero-hour contracts, that means half of them, are students and retirees, so therefore they're not women at all. Students, for example, will look for job experience in order to have a future job because with the degree is not enough. Now, what we find is that with zero-hour contracts, these two things can be combined. With zero contracts, what we have is a job experience, we have them studying a career, and furthermore, they will have an income. Many times, they are willing to have unpaid internships in order to be able to have this job experience. So therefore, if we're giving them the opportunity with zero contracts to have this that they require, to be able to attend to, school, to their academic education, and to give them the opportunity to have the job experience, we believe that this is very positive. Furthermore, the people of our retiring age have the opportunity to choose to manage to have a flexibility in the hours that they are actually working, which is also positive for them. We can also find a self-employed in areas such as online sales and marketing. These sectors really require this, and this will be delivered by my second speaker. Furthermore, we find job satisfaction, as many times they pursue the desire for flexibility in work-life balance, and finally, they earn a salary. So because we prove to you that in crisis and in the choice of the employee, this is totally beneficial, we believe that the world owes no man a living, but it owes every man the opportunity to make a decent one. Thank you.
Team Argentina told you today that zero-hour contracts are flexible and convenient. But ladies and gentlemen, that was the very justification that was used by corporations for years and years to abuse and exploit upon their workers. And we on Team Korea today are no longer willing to buy that excuse out. Before I move on to my final argument about how zero-hour contracts harm the overall economy, let me firstly examine what we heard from the Leader of Opposition. But before we delve into this specifically, there are 3 clarifications I would firstly like to make. Firstly, we say that today Team Opposition is abiding by a black and white logic. We tell you that today's debate is not a comparative between having a zero-hour contract and having no job. We believe that is the false dichotomy that they portrayed in today's debate. So why is this? It's the second clarification I would like to make. Because we told you clearly in the Prime Minister's speech that we're going to transition these zero-hour contract workers into fixed-hour contract workers. And this doesn't necessarily mean that you're increasing the number of working hours, but it does indeed mean that you're guaranteeing a certain amount of hours. Under our policy, we also abide by things like part-time jobs, temporary contracts, or even full-time jobs. But the only thing we are changing is we are guaranteeing everything, ladies and gentlemen. And that is something that they need to realize. But last but not least, they came up here and told you about Social Security. They told you that these people who are employed will have Social Security. But we tell you on Proposition Bench that Social Security is granted to everyone. In fact, welfare is also granted to people who are unemployed. So we tell you that further we'll be elaborating upon how we also benefit those people as well. But when they further come up and tell you, Mr. and Madam Speakers, that things like maternity leave can simply be also possible within our policy, they are simply lying into this debate, ladies and gentlemen. Because if you don't have a guaranteed number of hours, ladies and gentlemen, you automatically cannot have a maternity leave. If you do not have a guaranteed number of hours, you cannot be guaranteed a minimum wage. So we see that they are simply lying into these debate. But then what we also heard from the Leader of Opposition specifically is that regulation can be used. For example, we see the exclusivity clause that was banned. We'll have a few levels of response to this. Well, first, We see that the mechanism that they provided was absolutely non-existent. We want the next speaker to come up and clearly show us what type of regulations that they are actually going to have. But secondly, Mr. Madam Speakers, we tell you that regulation has already been taking place within the status quo, but it has clearly failed. And we see that more than 95% of the companies within the UK still exploit upon their workers. We see that if that is the case, it is extremely hard to regulate. We see that status quo has proved us wrong. But then what we also heard from the leader of opposition was this very big idea about unemployment. We see that that was possibly the biggest point coming from their side. But I would like to thoroughly break apart this argument. Firstly, we would like to deny that premise in the first place. Although unemployment is inevitable under both policies, we say that although that is still existent, transitioning from zero-hour contracts to a temporary or under our model, a fixed-hour contract, does not mean that it will lead to massive unemployment. We see that that was logically coming from their side. Even companies use that justification that minimum wage, for example, will lead to massive unemployment. But we see that companies were also proved wrong. But secondly, we're going to be showing you how unemployment can be worse under their model, which I'll be further elaborating upon my third argument. But we tell you that what they are doing is they're creating an employment bubble, because they are now creating an illusion that people are actually secure, that people are actually employed. We believe that is a detrimental harm that is coming from their side. But also, Nicholas clearly came up and told you about this analysis about how we shouldn't be compromising pre-existing labor rights like minimum wage or things like maternity leave. Yes, sir.
How can you explain that then most of people on zero-hour contracts work an average of 25 hours during their time periods on zero-hour contracts?
Okay, we believe that even if that was the case, we believe that is not true in the first place, but even if that were true, we see that guaranteeing 25 hours and simply hoping that this worker will be able to work 25 hours are two entirely different concepts. We're fine with workers working 25 hours as long as that is guaranteed, ladies and gentlemen, as long as we provide that security. But furthermore, let's analyze this in terms of stakeholders as well, because we believe that for the people who are already employed, this is extremely unfair, right? Because we believe that a company should not utilize the desperation of these people to give them unfair contracts and place them in a state of insecurity. But furthermore, this idea of unemployment, which is an extreme minority of cases, that is what you need to remember, judges. This is an extreme minority of cases, are also taken care of by the government. They are provided welfare benefits, and they can actually search for a new job, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that is a much safer world that we want to live in, rather than simply irresponsibly saying, oh, we want everybody to be insecure now, just because of this minority of people who are unemployed. But furthermore, they came up and told you about how 70% of workers do not want more hours. They told you that majority of people actually like working under zero-hour contracts. Firstly, we tell you that this is factually incorrect. We tell you that around half of the people are actually living in insecurity and deny this idea of zero-hour contracts. But secondly, we tell you that they have no alternative choice and they just came out of recession, especially in the United Kingdom. We see people have no other alternative, and with zero-hour contracts are becoming a widespread trend. We believe that fixed-hour contracts is not available on the table. That is why they say that I like zero-hour contracts. But if you provide a fixed-hour contract, we believe there is no reason for this UK worker to deny that. But then in their first argument, they further elaborated upon circulation of money, which directly clashes with my third argument. I'm going to be showing you how this harms consumer confidence, how this harms the economy. But last but not least, they told you about flexibility. And we really like this point, ladies and gentlemen, because we're going to show you how that is wrong as well. Firstly, we tell you that flexibility is given to the employer, not the employee. We believe that when you have an unpredictable schedule, when you're called 5 minutes before your shift or the day before, we tell you that is not flexible. Yes.
However, the clauses of these contracts clearly establish that the company has to provide you work whenever they want, but you can decide whether you attend or not to the job.
Okay, we tell you that that is not true, right? We say that it is the company's interest to not provide any obligation of work in the first place. That is the very definition of a zero-hour contract. Companies are not obliged to provide this. But furthermore, this idea of numerous jobs, we tell you that people working at McDonald's, Burger King, and Nike can no longer prioritize one company. So that is why when they talk about exclusivity clause, it makes it extremely hard. Because now this employee will go down the priority list of McDonald's, Burger King, and Nike. We tell you that this is making this employee even more insecure. But last but not least, let's move to my final argument, no thank you sir, about how this harms the overall economy. The premise we need to realize, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is a concrete harm to the economy that corporations cannot see. And employees have an income that is not guaranteed as well. Firstly, we tell you that this drags down consumer confidence. We fundamentally tell you that opposition's policy drags down consumer confidence and contributes to the wider trend of
underemployment. For example, we have seen a drag within the UK economy that has been heavily reliant on zero-hour contracts. According to Warwick Business School, we said zero-hour contracts could represent a drag on consumer spending and hence on economic recovery as well. People on insecure zero-hour contracts are less likely to have the confidence to spend than people with more stable incomes. For example, even if your family had the money to move to a different house or to buy a new refrigerator, they won't have the willingness to spend because they don't know whether their workload will continue or stop next month. Even if they have the money, they don't have the guarantee of being paid continuously. So we tell you that when consumers are responsible for more than 2/3 of the nation's economic activity, according to Investopedia, and more than 1.8 million consumers are under zero-hour contracts, it is ever more crucial that they actively ensure to contribute within the market. We see that under a world of zero-hour contracts, we say that it also can harm the economy. It can lead to a trickle-down effect in which consumers are no longer confident. We believe that this is ultimately harmful for the employer, for the employee, and for the whole nation as well. Just because we say that the corporation thinks it's good for the nation doesn't mean that it is good for everyone, which is why we are proud to make today's motion.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the tides change, so must the waves facing our problems do. And because we believe this should be the way, it is that we oppose the motion before us today, this how to ban the use of zero-hour contracts. So the question to be answered by the end of this debate is whether the eventual benefits that proposition has failed to prove of banning zero-hour contracts would bring about and justify all the harms we identified that are, but not limited to, the loss of jobs and family incomes, the loss of a proven method to revitalize economies in times of crisis, 3, the damage of businesses and entire industries that run on these zero-hour contracts, and lastly, the lack of choice in terms of flexibility for workers who desire that. All of which Team Proposition will have to prove today to win this debate. On our side, we began to show this through a 3-layered analysis. In our first one, we showed how these zero-hour contracts are a great solution in times of crisis, referred to as the unbearable lightness of the one-size-fits-all. On our second layer of analysis, we address the situation of employees who are looking for the characteristics of a job that are brought about with zero-hour contracts. And I will further address in a third scenario that related to specific sectors that need zero-hour contracts. And that is the one who adapts is the one who survives. But prior to the analysis of our case, I will provide a refutation on the case that proposition has brought about. And I will begin by pointing out the model and their arguments, secondly asking some questions for which we require answers, and lastly answering and clarifying some points that were left behind. So in terms of the model, they say, okay, we will ban zero-hour contracts. We say, this is really simple. We will ban them and put them on a fixed contract. As I will further address the question, this is impossible because this is a huge amount of people, for example, in the case of McDonald's, 90% of the workforce, that would suddenly, immediately be put into fixed contracts. And that is not possible, as we know, ladies and gentlemen, because the companies cannot simply afford it. So in the current situation, companies are not hiring. And why is it so? Because we are undergoing a crisis. As we said, firstly, under the current situation, they don't hire anyways. Secondly, any increase in demand does not necessarily lead to an increase in the contracts. No, thank you. In the contracts that are executed, what it does lead to is to an increase in the hours that workers already in the workforce work. However, zero-hour contracts are in itself a deregulation of the labor market, and this is positive, as seen, for example, in the Italy Jobs Act. It is an option for all the cases we described to incentivize the circulation of money in the economy and therefore reactivate it. So, they also spoke to us in terms of less consumer confidence, and I will address this through the questions I want the third speaker to please answer. So we would like them to bring us more analysis as regards the psychological constraints that are mentioned, because they said they are so. And aren't they greater for those who are unemployed, who cannot feed their family, who cannot have confidence in their skills because they are losing them as they do not get a job in maybe 4 years' time? No, thank you. Let me tell you that last studies show that most of the people who are now unemployed, it's 70% actually, have not been in a job for 2 years. And that's a lot of time losing technological skills and losing the skills you've got to work. And that is translated as confidence state dependent. Moreover, we would also like Team Proposition to answer to us, once again, how are they planning for McDonald's to fast and rapidly move 90% of the workforce who is now on a zero-hour contract into a suddenly fixed contract. And we expect to find answers in the following speeches. But let's take up one first.
On one side, your side says that red tape and regulation kills jobs. Then your side proposes placing red tape and regulation on zero-hour
No,
contracts.
sir.
What
we are
principle does
proposing
your
is
side
just
stand?
certain regulations which I will further specify that are related to protecting the world's other workers. Also, they spoke in terms of stability, and that's why precisely the country they mentioned, which is the UK, has a system that provides them with basic income, which is, if you work less than 16 hours a week, which is way below the average they mentioned for zero-hour contracts, you get the working tax credit, which guarantees you a fixed amount of money. And they also said, they spoke about the harms of exploitation, but I already addressed that. We also tell you that benefits have to be provided, and these include maternity pay, sick days, health insurance, and annual leave. And also, these workers are legal and therefore contributing taxes to the maintenance of the pension system, to point out, for example. We would also like to say that they mentioned as if zero-hour contracts were actually a huge problem. They say it's years and years, it's millions of people. Oh wait, it's just 2.4% in the Netherlands and just about 1.5% in the US. How is that like hundreds of millions of people who are damaged? Because we have proven to you not only that these potential harms are marginal but unexistent. We also are pointing on once again to regulations. We mentioned like exclusivity and also minimum time to warn an employee. And this would bring about, eliminating emojis. That would be great for this motion. The minority of the people are unemployed, they say. But once again, they are failing to see the fact that, for example, in Greece, that percentage reaches 27%, and that is actually a lot. What is indeed a minority is the amount of people that are working on a zero-hour contract, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, just about 3% in some countries. So to round up the refutation, we would like to say that the case of a proposition is quite divergent from what we would like to see in this debate. And I will continue now rebuilding the case. So in our first argument, we saw that we are undergoing a current state of the affairs in which companies are taking a minute. Companies cannot hire employees because they are not guaranteed that the demand will continue to increase. But yet you disagree.
Your side keeps on talking about these regulations you're going to place on these zero contracts will magically make them so good. Can you name one single tangible aspect of this regulation?
Yes, we of course have already mentioned exclusivity clauses, and they are making them good, but they are already good. Thank you for giving me that point. Okay, so we will also say that zero-hour contracts emerge as a viable solution in times of crisis. But even if there was no crisis, we also show that employees want these jobs. And why is it so? Because students cannot attend a job regularly when they are sitting for exams, and parents may also be in that same situation. But yet, through a zero-hour contract, they get the job experience they need. No, thank you. Internships are very similar to this. Students get into the university and say, I want a job, and they may even get into a company and not be paid for that. However, none of us would describe that as immoral, and zero-hour contracts are in no way that because they are getting paid for that job, and it is the same. They are satisfied and happier, as we also show, and they are even less likely to admit they are treated unfairly. For example, these statistics show this 27 versus 37%. So we now proceed to develop our third layer of analysis with a third scenario. The one who adapts is the one who survives. Here we prove to you how zero-hour contracts actually provide businesses in certain sectors the flexibility they require for the demand that is fluctuating. We have consultancy, we have catering, hotels, for example. 53% of the employees in hospitality in the UK are on zero-hour contracts, and yet proposition magically wants to put them on fixed contracts. Also agriculture, education, as we mentioned, and lastly, we need to say that these sectors imply more unstable jobs, and consequently, different contracts, which are zero-hour contracts, a viable solution in our economy. Now, just summing up. Our first argument showed that zero-hour contracts are indeed a solution in times of crisis. But even if there was no crisis, and if we were reckless enough to dismiss that, our second argument in our second layer of analysis proved that employees are willing to take these jobs for the flexibility they provide. And even if this did not happen, which it has, a ban in certain sectors would be highly detrimental for the economy. And that is why on this side of the house, by the end of the day, we stand by the phrase, the world owes no man a living, but owes the opportunity to make a decent one. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of this House, what Team Argentina has done for you today is make it seem as if team proposition here is to defend unemployment. as if we're here to argue that no job is better than zero-hour contracts. They were only willing, from the very start to the very end, they were only willing to argue and argue against the worst case scenario of team proposition, where everybody is suddenly unemployed, where 90% of McDonald's all go jobless, ladies and gentlemen. Team proposition was never defending that kind of world from the very start to the very end, ladies and gentlemen. Because of this black and white logic, we think that Team Argentina was essentially unengaging to our case in any sense, ladies and gentlemen. At the proposition within today's debate, I'm making it very clear why we take this debate home by analyzing today's debate in the terms of the three major issues it came down to. First of all, let's talk about the benefits of flexibility, and if those benefits actually exist, both for the companies and for the consumer and for the workers. But secondly, let's talk about the stability and the basic labor rights for the workers, which side provides a better world. And thirdly, let's talk about the general impact on the economy. But first of all, let's deal with this issue of flexibility, ladies and gentlemen, because this was the primary essential benefit that they had to prove to win today's debate. But basically, their first of all point about flexibility was about companies. How companies need this flexibility, they need zero-hour contracts. Take your seat, man. And how without this, suddenly, they won't be willing to hire. But they never really proved to us the logical mechanism of why McDonald's would suddenly fire 90% of their workers in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. Because our stance, Mr. Madam Speaker, is not that McDonald's should suddenly, we're not going to force them to suddenly provide 95 works for every single of their cashiers and all of their employees, ladies and gentlemen. We're not forcing them to give full-time 95 works for all of their workers. We still actually promote, we actually encourage, part-time jobs and temporary jobs. But the only difference, ladies and gentlemen, is that under our world, we want McDonald's to provide fixed schedules at least, to provide a promised schedule and promised wages for their employees, ladies and gentlemen. So the basic only difference is we're not trying to increase the incomes and wages to a massive extent. We're only providing that stability and guaranteed hours, ladies and gentlemen. That's exactly why McDonald's, who uses 90% of their workers as zero-hour contracts, won't have an incentive to fire all their workers in the first place. They still demand a certain amount of labor. The only difference is that now they have the responsibility to provide fixed schedules and fixed incomes, ladies and gentlemen. We don't see the mechanism why mass unemployment will happen in the first place. But even if, ladies and gentlemen, even if we concede to the fact that McDonald's will indeed lose some sort of flexibility, that is a sacrifice that we are willing to take, Madam Speaker. Because we believe that essentially, throughout the history of companies and economy in the first place, companies were always in the upper hand and a power imbalance to the workers, ladies and gentlemen. The workers had no leverage. That's exactly why we're not willing in today's debate to side with those companies and their flexibility in the first place. We go with this theme line that the flexibility of the employer means the insecurity of the employee, ladies and gentlemen. Now, having that said, let's talk about the flexibility point about the workers, ladies and gentlemen. Whether flexibility really exists for the workers, Mr. and Madam Speaker. We don't think so, ladies and gentlemen, because now, first of all, we think that their characterization, talking only about students and retiring people and how they have flexibility, first of all, that vastly limits their case because they're only talking about a quarter of the whole population of zero-hour contracts. But before we move on, yes, ma'am.
That's why we had a first layer of analysis with the situation of quizzes and lastly, sectors that don't have zero-hour contracts, besides those employees who want them.
Okay, let's talk about all of the stakeholders, whether they have flexibility. So first of all, their benefit that they talked about was that, these workers, they can decide. They can decide to take or not on that certain shift, and they can decline. But ladies and gentlemen, we already told you that they don't really have that choice to refuse an offer in the first place. Because if you refuse an offer from a company to come on a certain day, then you go down the priority list of that company, ladies and gentlemen. Next time they'll be less willing to call you on a certain day. You'll be on the lower part of the priority list if you keep on declining offers, ladies and gentlemen. So their benefit, talking about flexibility, how you can take multiple jobs, doesn't really exist. Because if you take multiple jobs, and if your schedules collide, and if you decline some of those offers, then you will be in a less of a position for leverage in all of those companies' works, ladies and gentlemen. That's exactly why flexibility doesn't exist for the workers, it only exists for the employers, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, they talk about how one size doesn't fit all, and they talk about job experience and flexibility. But Madam Speaker, as we said, we're not here to decline and reject part-time jobs. We completely agree that you can have a part-time job, you can have temporary work, you can work only 3 times a week if you want, but you have to have a fixed schedule and a fixed income for stability, ladies and gentlemen. That's why those points about one size fits all doesn't really fit in the context of today's debate. So on the first issue of flexibility only exists for the employer at the demand of them, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't exist for the employees, ladies and gentlemen. But let's move on to the second issue of today's debate. So let's really talk about the stability and the security for the employees, ladies and gentlemen, because those are the essential stakeholders of today's debate. So basically, we told you from the very start how these employees are extremely exploited. They're notified by emoticons at the 40% of them are given a work text at the beginning of the shift on that day, ladies and gentlemen, with no further notice. And moreover, many of them are actually dropped at that day when they were actually called and when they actually went to work. You get this kind of instability leads to psychological insecurity, but moreover, the basic dignity, it destroys the dignity of these workers and their hands, ladies and gentlemen. But the only response coming from Team Opposition was they never engaged to any of our points about instability. They only said that let's just compare this to being jobless. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we already proven to you that first of all, mass unemployment doesn't happen in the first place. We think that is a classic excuse coming from companies in the first place. When we first introduced the minimum wage policy, the opposition people to that policy said that mass unemployment will happen, everybody will be unemployed, but that didn't actually happen. They have to prove to us the logical mechanism of why exactly these companies will be incentivized to fire all of their workers and all their cashiers, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, we told you that even if some kind of unemployment happens, we think that this is a better world than this employment bubble that happens on Team Opposition, ladies and gentlemen. Because the thing that happens with zero-hour contracts, they expect 8 hours of work, but they get only 4 hours. They expect 20 hours, they expect to get that work, but they only get called 3 times a month, 2 times a month, ladies and gentlemen. We think that this essential insecurity and a difference between your expectation of being safely employed, but actually getting no work, is even worse than being unemployed, Madam Speaker. Yes, ma'am.
However, we tell you once again that 25% all of the people who are in the zero contracts have at least 25 hours in average of jobs per week.
The thing is, Madam and Mr. Speaker, those 25 hours are compared to the 37 hours that regular fixed contract workers have, ladies and gentlemen. We think it is completely meaningless for them to say that 25 hours more. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, they're essentially put into an illusion that they are safely employed, but they're actually only called at the wage, at the demand of the work of the employer, only 3 times a month. They expect what they do not actually get, ladies and gentlemen. We think that this is an even worse situation than even unemployment, because when you're unemployed, at least you have the basic benefits and the welfare from the government. Moreover, you have a chance to actually plan out and reach for future jobs, ladies and gentlemen. That does not happen in the employment bubble under their side. But moreover, ladies and gentlemen, even if we concede to the fact that some unemployment happens and like some people do get unemployed, we think that, ladies and gentlemen, if you really want to solve unemployment and put that unemployment rate to 1%, you can ban the minimum wage policy. You can ban maternity leave policy and ban all the basic labor rights. But we think that, Madam Speaker, the government is something more. The government can not only think about the employment and how much the wages of the companies are, but ladies and gentlemen, they have to think about the basic labor rights that these workers are essentially entitled to. That's exactly why we'll be citing on Team Proposition on the second issue about stability. But on to the third issue about the basic harms and benefits to the economy. We gave you an entire argument in our Deputy Prime Minister, elaborating about how if you don't have a stable wage, if you don't have stable income, and you don't have any security, you'll be less willing to spend on those basic things. They were entirely unengaging to this whole argument, ladies and gentlemen. This is very important, because consumer confidence is essential to the economy. Consumer purchases amount to 2/3 of the whole economy and the money circulation. And if the ordinary people are less willing to spend, and if they don't have consumer confidence, that's an immense damage to the whole economy as a whole, ladies and gentlemen. And they were essentially unresponsive to this point at all. That's exactly why, for these 3 reasons. Because flexibility is not a benefit that happens on their side. And second, how the stability of these workers is essential for the government to protect. And thirdly, about the harms of the economy, we are proud to propose.
So, where does the first and big and not supported assumption of the proposition come? Now, this mistake comes when they told us that we are no longer living in times of crisis. When they told us that we are now in a period where we recovered from this crisis that we used to live in, the 2008 crisis. So what is the problem here? The proposition should be able to tell us and state to us that unemployment is low, that people have job choices, that we are completely out of this crisis. Yet we believe the proposition couldn't do this for the simple reason that we are not out of this crisis. We are still living in complicated periods, and therefore these zero-hour contracts must remain as a form of adaptation to our times. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members of the House. So, what is the motion before us today for the last time? This House would ban the use of zero-hour contracts. So let's start by going to the core of the debate. First of all, what did side proposition have to prove to us in order to win this debate? The 4 main things. That banning zero-hour contracts would justify the real harms, the real harms that we would live in, such as the loss of jobs and family income, the loss of a proven method of revitalizing an economy in crisis as we are living in today, damage to businesses and entire industries, and reducing flexibility for those who need it. No, thank you. So what can we see the side proposition did? They mainly focused only on damage of the industries and up to a certain point tackled flexibility. Now I will further on move on to explain why they did not efficiently tackle these points and how actually they completely ignored the two other main points, which were the loss of jobs and family income and the loss of a proven method of revitalizing the economy, which is a major point on our side. So, what will I do during my speech? I'll go through the three main points of clash, which were a reality we must face, second of all, an abuse and exploitation, and third, the big bad wolf.
Sure.
So, no thank you. Let's start with certain clarifications that are necessary for this debate. What were we told by side proposition? No thank you. We were told that we made a black and white analysis, that we just simply surfaced the rivers here and we didn't actually dig deep. Now, they told us that they were proposing permanent jobs. Now, we think this sounds quite black and white on side proposition. And why is this? Because they told us that these jobs would simply be created. And we want to ask side proposition to dig deeper and explain. No, thank you. So we want to ask side proposition, how will these jobs be created when companies don't want to hire since we're still living in these times of crisis? How will this be possible? Yes, please.
Why would McDonald's fire half of their cashiers just because they have to provide fixed schedules?
When we are living in times of crisis, McDonald's would, and we're banning zero-hour contracts, McDonald's would not have a choice. Why? Because of the regulated cash flows in the industry, in the economy as a whole. Therefore, by banning the zero-hour contracts, what will these companies do? They'll increase the hours of the current workers. They'll make them work even harder and more. And therefore, there will be unemployment as we have constantly analyzed throughout our case. So, no thank you. Let's move to our first point of clash, which was a reality we must face. So, starting by the 2008 crisis that is not over, we would tell you that this is all over the world where social conditions have not improved. And why have they not improved? Because we can see that specifically in Europe, yet it can be seen all over the world, unemployment is extremely high. People are not living in good social conditions, no thank you. Unemployment has not recovered since the 2008 crisis. Therefore, we can see that we still are living in it. And this proves our major point that zero-hour contracts are a way of revitalizing the economy. And what has side proposition told us? In their first speech, they told us themselves that these zero-hour contracts are a method of recovery. And why does this fall for our side? This falls for our side because this is a method of recovery and we are still recovering. Therefore, we still need to apply these contracts. No thank you. Therefore, it is normal that we still use them since we remain in these times. So what is another problem with the crisis that we constantly analyze on side opposition? We showed that another problem was that companies and businesses don't hire. They told us this was another black and white analysis. And why is this that they don't hire? And we constantly explain once again that they would not be hiring because of the limited cash flow in the economy. These companies cannot hire because of the situation of the economy, which is deteriorating since 2008, and we have not yet recovered from. No, thank you. So, team proposition would, of course, unintentionally be leaving people with increased unemployment. And this leads us to the fact, no thank you, that people have no choice, and they criticize this from on-side opposition, but the fact is, it may sound black and white, but it's not, because it is simple reality. When these people won't be hired because of the jobs that team proposition suddenly magically wanted to create, which is not possible, they will not have a choice. These contracts will be banned. All of a sudden, since they haven't provided us with a range in which they will be banned, these people will be found all of a sudden with no contract and no job at all. Yet they want to provide them with jobs which they haven't explained where they would come from. So, this high unemployment would be created, and they would have no choice, which is either no living or the chance to make one. So, continuing, no thank you. They told us about the massive scale of zero-hour contracts, and we would like to refute this by giving other numbers. Let's pass these numbers they gave us to percentages. First of all, in the UK, one of the major countries applying the zero-hour contract, what's the percentage? 2.4%. Netherlands, 2.4%. US, 1.6%. Now, are these massive numbers? No, they aren't, but yet we still take them into account on side opposition. We believe that we do not want to leave these people on unemployment. Therefore, this doesn't lead. Therefore, these numbers show that this won't lead to the massive economic damages that a whole argument of team proposition was dedicated to. They told us that the economies would even farther be ruined by these systems. And why would they not be? Simply because these numbers are not big enough to ruin a whole economy. So, second point, no thank you, abuse and exploitation. We were accused of creating lies. And why is this? Because let us clear this up for the last time. We told you that there is maternity and paternity leave with other social benefits such as minimum wage. Now, what's the problem here? They told us you can't be giving maternity and paternity leave if there are no hours guaranteed. And what would we like to tell you to this? We want to say that these benefits are present whether or not no matter how many hours you're provided with. And why is this? Because this is established in the contract's terms. It is not necessarily based on the amount of hours you work. You may work from 10 to 25, yet you will receive the same benefits because it's established in the contract. So, saying the minimum wage is guaranteed based on the amount of hours worked. So, moving on to the next point, which would be, not talking about, no thank you. So, the second point, which is not talking about mass unemployment. And what is this? We talked about the unemployment of people on zero-hour contracts, and they would be leaving them in this, I'll take you in a second. They would be leaving them in this condition of constant unemployment due to the fact they will not be hired. So we gave a detailed analysis of why companies would not be hired, yet propositions only assume that jobs would be created. Yet,
when levels of unemployment in the US are at pre-2008 levels, why are the usage of zero-hour contracts increasing exponentially?
yet let's not look only at the US, let's look at the whole world. What is the problem here? In the whole world, we can see that these rates of unemployment are not at a pre-2008 level. These levels of unemployment are at the same or even higher because we're still living in this time. So let's move on to the third, the big bad wolf. Here we're telling you, they told us that they're willing to sacrifice flexibility of companies and how workers are constant victims. Now, we might not be able to provide fixed rates, yet we want to show how there is actually 25-hour average work, and what did they tell us to this? Well, you know what, people on permanent jobs have 36 hours. Now, we want to tell you that this cannot be compared, and why can it not be compared? Because we wish we could live in the utopia that the proposition is proposing here, but we simply believe that this is not possible, we must live in the reality we are currently at. So, it is for all these reasons that side propositions do not manage to prove their burden, and why on this side of the house we believe that the world owes no man a living, but it owes every man the opportunity to make a decent one. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, when in times of crisis, what we need to think is about our priorities. And what we believe on this side of the house is that if we have a crisis and the options are either being employed under a zero-hour contract and have some hours guaranteed, which are 25, and the other option is being unemployed, what we choose is to feed our children at the end of the month. So ladies and gentlemen, to begin the reply speech, we would like to establish three main questions which answer the issue that was established today at the beginning of the debate. The first one being, does this justify the loss of jobs and family incomes together with a proven method to revitalize the economy in times of crisis? Secondly, does it justify the damage to businesses and entire industries that run on these contracts? And finally, does it justify the lack of choice or flexibility for those who require it? And we will prove to you how the proposition failed to prove today's burden. Now yes, in order to start with the first one and analyze the scenario of crisis, which was the most debated in today's debate. Proposition told us that they will be easily hired in their permanent job and that if not, they will be penalized economically. However, what we tell you on our side of the house is that they are not going to hire them. Then, ladies and gentlemen, there is no worse blind than the one who does not want to see. Why do we say this? First of all, because multinational companies, for example, will not fulfill these clauses. Second of all, it is even worse in times of crisis when businesses do not hire at all. And finally, as a third answer, we tell you that when we have to choose between unemployment and zero-hour contracts, we choose zero-hour contracts. As regards stability, they tell us that in crisis, it is very hard to find an income, and what we believe is that this is totally true. However, if we are finding a job that gives us an average of 25 hours, we believe that that is totally positive for our people. As regards what we told you, we presented to you the argument, the unbearable blindness of one size fits all, in which we explained to you how these contracts are a solution in times of crisis, and how we cannot just have permanent jobs in these times because employers will not just hire people. In times of crisis, fear of retaliation of demand leads to the increase of workload of the current employees, but not to the hiring of new ones, in order to avoid costs for hiring. So therefore, we are not reactivating our economy. What we believe is that zero-hour contracts provide this flexibility in order to incentivize the employers to be able to hire and therefore reactivate the economy. So therefore, the first question falls for our side. As regards to the second question, in which we speak about the sectors, they told us that the company guarantees no rights and that the workers would be totally exploited by their employers. However, we believe that this is a false evil, as we presented to you the social benefits that are actually guaranteed in all of the countries, in many countries in which zero-hour contracts are actually being executed, such as annual leave, maternity and paternity leave, and many other benefits. Furthermore, on our side of the house, we tell you that many sectors, such as consultancy, catering, hotels, restaurants, agriculture, marketing, technology, and I don't go on because there are a lot, can guarantee the hours for the workers, and that therefore clients do not request, that clients have not requested. So therefore, what we find is that they do need these contracts. Now yes, to analyze the final layer of analysis, the final question, what happens with the flexibility, what happens with the choice of the people? They tell us that flexibility only applies for the company. They first tell us that there is no stability, and when we tell them that there are 25 average hours, they tell us that yes, but permanent workers have 36. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, but we do not guarantee everything to everyone. Now yes, they ignore the fact they couldn't answer the question, why are we going to deny them the opportunity? Why are we going to deny the people who choose flexibility the opportunity to achieve it? Here we divided not only two groups, but many more, in which we included students, retirees, parents, and self-employed people, and told you how these people were satisfied by the job this way. So therefore, this, of course, flexibility does happen. So at the end of the day, what we find is that the proposition could not prove the ratio in which they had to justify the loss of jobs, the loss of a chance to revitalize the economy, the damage to businesses and industries, and the lack of flexibility. And therefore, on this side of the house, at the end of the day, we believe that the world owes no man a living, but it sure owes every man the opportunity to make a decent one. Thank you.
When a corporation looks at a pregnant mother who has 2 children depending on her at home, does the corporation look at that mother and think about how they have a responsibility to care for them? Or do they look at her and see how much profit can I squeeze out of that woman? Ladies and gentlemen, Team Opposition's main stance today was that these individuals are going to increase the economy, they're going to prevent unemployment, and these contracts are good for our nation. And then they also came up here and talked about how these individuals were just 2.4% of the economy. But ladies and gentlemen, it's shameful because those 2.4% of the people in the economy are at the very bottom of the social ladder. We think ultimately a way a society should be judged is by the way it treats its most vulnerable citizens. I'm going to talk about the 2 worlds today that the proposition side and opposition side disagree on. Number 1, which side benefits the employees? Secondly, who benefits the economy? We told you on our side that it's up to the employee that he or she doesn't get the time to be able to provide childcare for his or her child. We also told you they're the ones who move down the priority list because companies like Amazon often take advantage of these individuals. We told you these individuals don't get benefits because, ladies and gentlemen, even if we fundamentally disagree on this fact level, let's think it out logically because that's the only way you can do that. We told you on our side, if a company is not forced to provide certain levels of work, they are not forced to give that individual benefits. And then they tried to come up here and tell us that individuals have a conscious choice when they take these kinds of jobs. We've proven to you why they don't have a conscious choice. We've proven to you that individuals don't have labor unions, they don't have welfare if they don't take this job, and ultimately it's not the balance of power, it's a balance of imbalance of power, it's an asymmetry of information, it's an asymmetry of transparency. We think ultimately on their side, they're the ones who get rid of its employees, they didn't engage on this clearly, and that's why they didn't really understand the deeper nuances and the deeper analysis within our case on why we benefit the employees. But secondly, on who actually benefits the economy. It may seem like their side would win, but they painted this entire debate, a debate on unemployment versus 0-hour contracts. We engaged with them. We gave you the evenness scenario, and we gave you the Warwick Business School study that showed that when individuals aren't confident to spend on the economy, they won't spend. And when money doesn't go into the economy falters. We also told you that unemployment is back to pre-2008 levels, 5.2%. But ladies and gentlemen, 0-hour contracts have increased. They've increased, they've tripled, they've quadrupled. And ladies and gentlemen, when they come here and talk about regulation will kill jobs, red tape is bad for the economy, and then they propose placing more regulation and red tape on the economy, what's their principle? Ladies and gentlemen, their only regulation they gave you were exclusivity clauses. We proved to you exclusivity clauses are already banned under the status quo. So ladies and gentlemen, they only defend the status quo, and even if somehow it harmed the economy, we've proven to you that we are not willing to give up certain values. During the Great Depression, did President Franklin Delano Roosevelt think, hey, if we got rid of the minimum wage, we could indeed decrease unemployment? If we got rid of paid maternity leave, could we increase employment? Because, ladies and gentlemen, this debate is not a debate between 0-hour contracts versus employment. It's a debate about whether or not the pregnant women who work for the company for 20 years will be able to get maternity leave because and pay for a child and get that flexible schedule and predictable schedule because the corporation is forced to do it. Because under a land of McDonald's, they won't provide that. It's whether or not they need to come up here and defend, they have to come up here and defend why a man who had cancer for 20 years and still worked for that company for 20 years won't get that health insurance, because ultimately it's for the greater good of the economy. We told you, and we've won on the employees, we've won on the economy, we've shown you why indeed, even if it harms the economy, we're not willing to sacrifice those 2.4% of hardworking individuals, and ultimately they failed to talk to you why it was the government's obligation to harm those individuals for the greater good. We are extremely proud to oppose. Thank you.